Good morning. My Aunt Grace was born into a large family in Massachusetts not long after the Great Depression and lived there with her three brothers, Sal, Jimmy, and Anthony Biondo. She also had two sisters, Rose and my mother Mary. The whole family worked at my grandfather's bakery just a few miles outside of Boston, and it was not easy for them because not long after the Great Depression, World War II quickly came to fruition. My grandfather was known for being a very frugal man with his money, and the children were quite vocal about this many years later. They worked very long hours after school and weekends making bread and were up late with their studies and homework. They learned to do without very quickly. Grace and my mother Mary were very close. This often happens when there are so many brothers in one family. I remember when Grace and my mother would start to tell stories of their time growing up in the 1930s, and it was quite fascinating and also very difficult to hear. One such story centered around toilet paper, or the lack of it. My brothers and I would run from the room in horror when they would begin to tell stories about how they were forced to use anything around the house they could find to clean themselves. Even telephone book pages were not safe from the children during that difficult time. Yes, it was a very difficult time, but it was also a character-building time. As the children got older and finished school, most got married and scattered about the country with their families. My mother Mary met my dad and settled in Marlborough, Massachusetts, and Grace went to Tennessee, California, among other places. My mother missed Grace terribly, but was overjoyed many years later when my parents ultimately retired. Grace found her way to Florida and moved in just a few miles away in Dunedin. It was such a joy to have my Aunt Grace so close now. Everything was better. Birthdays, Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmases, all were so much more fun because of my Aunt Grace. She was always there making cookies, brownies, buying presents, and doing whatever she could to make our lives better. She was never too busy to make the time for us, and we were all very grateful. My mother became a happier person because of Grace. My aunt loved her new life in Dunedin and her job at Florida Power. She was very active in her church and loved cooking for the bazaars, bake sales, and special events. She made so many special friends that made her life so full and complete. Her church and her faith meant so much to her, and she wanted to show it in every way she could. When my mother got very sick in early 2010, Grace was always there for her. She was a comforting presence for my mother in her final months, and she did everything she could to make her life easier. When my mother finally passed, it was difficult for Grace, but she hid her pain from the rest of the world as best she could. She was comforted in the fact that she would ultimately see my mother again in the hereafter, and she and the family would be reunited once again. You see, Grace was the last Biondo, the last of her family of 8, and I know she is overjoyed once again to be with her family by her side in heaven. As I close here today, I will tell you something that not too many people outside of my family know about. Every birthday and Christmas, my mother Mary and Grace exchanged a single gift with each other among the many other gifts they bought. I believe this same unopened gift has been exchanged between the two sisters for perhaps 70 times over the last century. Since my mother passed away in April of 2010, it sits in my bedroom display case where I will always cherish it and think fondly of Grace and my mother. Inside a very small, ornately wrapped gift box, there contains a single item. It is a roll of toilet paper.